They gave her a bunk at the far end of the tent. Nobody asked her name the first night. Nobody offered coffee. Sergeant Dale Morrow watched her drag her gear through the flap rifle case slung on her back like a hitchhiker's pack, boots already caked with the red Afghan mud that got into everything, your socks, your teeth, your sleep, and, he thought, 2 weeks, maybe 3. That's how long the desk assignments usually lasted before they found a reason to rotate someone back. She set her pack down. Sat on the edge of the cot. Didn't look at anyone. Her name was Specialist Elena Vasquez. 23 years old. 5'4" in boots. Assigned to Bravo Team, Forward Operating Base Kellerman, Kunar Province, as an intelligence asset and secondary marksman support. That's what the paperwork said. The paperwork also said she'd been at Fort Benning for 14 months before this, which meant she'd been in a box somewhere, behind glass, watching feeds and pushing coordinates on a screen. Not here. Not in this particular mud. I was the team's senior rifleman, which sounds more impressive than it was. What it meant in practice was that I'd been at Kellerman longer than anybody except Morrow and our medic, Corporal Boots Erickson, and that I'd stopped flinching at the mountain sounds that weren't gunfire but sounded like it at 0300. My name is Sergeant First Class Ray Calder. I'd been in country 11 months. My hands had developed a permanent tremor in the left index finger that the doc said was stress-related and that I called Tuesday. I watched Vasquez from across the tent the same way everyone else did. Quiet. That's the word. She was just quiet in a way that made people uncomfortable, the way a room gets quiet right before someone says something they can't take back. She answered questions with the minimum viable number of words. She ate alone. She cleaned her rifle, a modified M110 SAS with a suppressor attachment and a scope the rest of us couldn't afford if we sold our cars, with the kind of focused, meditative patience that either meant she was very good at what she did or very good at performing that she was. Morrow had decided, within 48 hours, that it was the latter. What kind of sniper school produces that, he said, on her third morning, loud enough that Vasquez could hear it from 2 cots over. He was talking to Corporal Jesse Preach Hartman, who had the unfortunate quality of laughing at everything Morrow said because Preach was 20 and Morrow had a silver star and the math worked out to unconditional admiration. Preach laughed. Vasquez looked up from her rifle exactly once, held Morrow's gaze for half a second, then looked back down. That was it. I watched Morrow's face do a thing that small recalibration men do when the dismissal they expected doesn't come. He smiled anyway. Preach laughed again, a little late. I'd been in enough squads to know what this was. Morrow wasn't cruel. He was scared of what he didn't understand, and he processed that fear the way a lot of soldiers do, by making the unknown thing smaller, easier to file, easier to dismiss. Vasquez was an unknown. She'd come from somewhere he didn't have access to. She hadn't bled alongside him. She hadn't earned the right, in his accounting, to be trusted with anything that mattered. She hadn't spoken a word in Pashto yet, either, which Morrow took as evidence. I took it as patience. The mountains above Kellerman were not scenic. I know that's what people expect, that there's some kind of terrible beauty to the place that soldiers secretly hold on to. Maybe some guys had that. I didn't. What I had was an intimate knowledge of approximately 70 square kilometers of rock, wind, and hidden valleys that looked benign from satellite imagery and were not benign on foot. The Korengal spine ran northeast of us. 2 clicks past the wire, the terrain dropped and folded in ways that gave excellent cover to people who'd been walking these ridges their entire lives. We'd lost 2 men from Alpha Company in the previous rotation to a shooter nobody ever found. Single rounds, clean angles, half a kilometer out. Both shots had come from a position that 3 different teams had swept and cleared. The man was still up there somewhere. Or someone like him. Our mission that week was resupply escort, moving 3 vehicles up a switchback road to a small outpost called Echo 7 that sat at 2,400 meters and hadn't received a full resupply in 11 days because the road had been flagged after Alpha's losses. Standard precaution. New suite protocol. Get eyes on the ridgeline, clear the route, then move the vehicles. Standard. Except nothing was standard above 2,000 meters in Kunar. The night before the mission, I found Vasquez outside the tent, sitting on an overturned crate with her scope in her lap. Not the rifle. Just the scope. She was holding it up, not looking through it, just holding it at arm's length the way you'd hold something you'd just noticed was broken. I sat down on the ground next to the crate. Didn't say anything. She didn't either. After a while I said, "What are you looking at?" "Distortion," she said. "There's a heat shimmer coming off the motor pool. Affects the glass at this range." She lowered the scope. "It'll be gone by 0400. You checked?" "I check every night." I looked at her profile in the dark. She had the particular stillness of someone who'd spent long hours in small spaces, the compressed quality of a person who'd learned to take up as little room as possible. Not submission. Something else. Conservation. "Morrow's going to put you on the second vehicle," I said. "Static overwatch position from the hill at marker 7. He thinks the ridge threat is from the northeast." She was quiet for a moment. "It's not," she said. "I know." She looked at me. The first time she'd really looked at me directly. Her eyes were dark and entirely level, the kind of calm that takes real work to build. "He won't listen," I said. "Unless you've got something concrete." "I have something concrete." "Then, brief him." "I briefed him this morning." I sat with that for a second. "And?" She looked back at the mountains. The scope was still in her hand. "He asked me if I'd ever been outside the wire," she said. There it was. I didn't say I was sorry. She didn't want that. I could tell because she wasn't wearing it on her face, the hurt, the indignation. Whatever she felt about Morrow, she'd already filed it somewhere it couldn't interfere with what she needed to do tomorrow. That filing process. That's what I'd been reading is coldness. It wasn't coldness. "The threat is from the southwest," she said. "There's a rock shelf at approximately 1,900 meters, bearing 247. The depression behind it creates a wind shadow. A shooter in that position would have a clean line on the road from marker 3 to marker 9. No crosswind interference. Cover on 3 sides." She paused. "I've been watching a thermal variance on the satellite feed at that location for 4 days. Not consistent. Intermittent. The kind you get from a body moving in and out of cover." I sat with that. "You've been reading satellite feeds." "That's my job." "And, Morrow said satellite thermals at that resolution could be wildlife." She said it flat. No editorial. Just the fact of it, set down like a stone. I looked at the mountains again. "I'll talk to him," I said. "You don't have to." "No," I said. "I know." I stood up. The cold was getting serious by then, the particular Afghan mountain cold that goes through a jacket like it's got a grudge. I started back toward the tent. "Calder," she said. I stopped. "I need a second position," she said. "Marker 4. The rock cluster on the south side. If I'm right about the southwest shelf, I need line of sight from 4, not 7. The angle from 7 has a blind spot. Morrow won't authorize it." "No." She said it like she already knew. Like she'd already done this calculation and arrived at the conclusion and was simply informing me of it as a courtesy, the way you tell someone it's raining before you both go out into the rain. I went back inside. I argued with Morrow for 20 minutes. He listened with the particular expression of a man who has already decided and is being polite about it. He cited protocol. He cited the original sweep assessment. He cited, with genuine irritation, the fact that Vasquez had been in country for 5 days and was reading satellite thermals like she's back at Benning. "She's got 4 days of feed data," I said. "Wildlife," Morrow said. "Martinez flagged the same sector 2 weeks ago. Wildlife. Martinez is back in Germany with a plate in his shin." Morrow looked at me. "She goes to marker 7, he said. "That's final." I went to sleep. I didn't sleep. At 0330 I got up and found my boots. The convoy staged at 0500. 3 vehicles. 2 gun trucks and a supply Humvee. 11 men plus Vasquez, who was loaded into the lead vehicle's passenger seat with her rifle case across her knees, jaw set, looking at the road through the windshield like she was memorizing it. Morrow was in the second truck. He gave me a nod as I climbed into the third. The gate opened. The dogs in the local village, half a click east, started barking. They always barked when we left. The road to Echo 7 was not a road by any civilian definition. It was a track 2 tire widths of compressed gravel and hardpan that switched back up the mountain in 17 turns, each one tight enough that the gun trucks had to 3-point through. On either side the ground either dropped or climbed in ways that were uniformly bad for us and uniformly good for anyone watching from above. The first 4 kilometers were quiet. Not the good kind of quiet. The kind where you're listening so hard your ears ring and the silence keeps feeding back on itself and somewhere in the back of your skull a very old animal is running in very small circles. I was watching the southwest ridgeline. At marker 3, I keyed my radio. Vasquez. Status. A pause. Then, in position. She was at marker 4. I don't know how she'd managed it. I don't know what she'd said or not said to get there instead of 7, whether she'd simply redirected herself when nobody was watching or whether she'd done something clever in the staging confusion. I didn't ask. I heard her voice on the radio, calm, the same low note it always was, and something in me unclenched exactly one turn. Morrow's going to lose his mind, said Private Delgado from the driver's seat. Keep your eyes on the road, I said. Delgado kept his eyes on the road. Marker 4 passed. 5. 6. The convoy was making the long open stretch between marker 6 and marker 7, the ugliest part 200 meters of road with no natural cover and a clear sightline from the southwest shelf that Vasquez had been trying to tell us about for 4 days. That's when the radio went to static. Not signal degradation. Active jamming. The kind that takes equipment and preparation and means someone has been watching your frequency. Preach's voice cut through, broken, contact, southwest, I've got, the first round hit the lead truck's hood. Not the engine. The hood. 6 inches forward of where it needed to be to kill the vehicle. Which told me, in the 3-second window between the impact sound and my brain catching up, that it wasn't a miss. It was a ranging shot. The shooter was dialing in. Everything happened at once. The lead truck braked. The supply Humvee behind it swerved. Morrow's voice, sharp and steady, dismount, defensive positions, contact southwest, and, I thought, southwest. He said southwest. I thought, she was right. The second round hit the road 3 feet in front of the lead truck. I was out of the vehicle by then, behind the rear wheel, both knees in gravel that felt like gravel had a personal agenda. Delgado was down beside me. His breathing was the fast, shallow kind that lives right at the edge of useful, so I grabbed his shoulder and squeezed once firm, no words, and felt it slow slightly. That's all it takes sometimes. One anchor point. One thing that isn't noise. The southwest ridgeline was 400 and some meters out. Bare rock, afternoon light, and somewhere in that geometry a man with a very good rifle and 4 days of watching us move. Or longer. My radio crackled, the jamming cycling in irregular waves. Calder, Vasquez's voice, breaking. In position. I have static shelf at 247, I need it static. She was trying to tell me something. The third round came. It hit the supply Humvee's passenger door. The metal sound of it, that flat, catastrophic whang, traveled through my chest before it registered in my ears. Preach was on that side. I heard him yell. Not a scream. A yell. The difference matters, a yell means the man is still running on something. Preach. I shouted. I'm good. I'm good, it's the door, but the fourth round would be different. The shooter was walking them in, which meant he'd found his range, and the fifth would be worse, and the thing about a competent sniper working a static convoy from elevation is that he can simply wait. He has all the time that we don't. Every second we stay pinned is a second closer to the moment he stops ranging and starts choosing. I needed Vasquez on the radio. I keyed twice our signal for working under jamming, listen, and waited. Nothing. Then, from the direction of marker 4, the sound I hadn't been expecting. One shot. Suppressed. The sound of it was subtle, a compressed crack, more mechanical than ballistic, the particular note of a quality suppressor on a well-maintained rifle. It came from the south side of the rock cluster at marker 4, which meant she'd climbed, which meant she'd found an angle that didn't exist on paper until you were physically standing in the terrain and looking at it with your own two eyes. The incoming fire stopped. Just stopped. The mountain went quiet in that particular way it has after something has been decided. The wind kept going. The gravel under my boots kept being gravel. But the rounds stopped coming and the air changed, and every man on that road felt it simultaneously, the particular drop in pressure that happens when the immediate threat is gone and your body doesn't quite believe it yet. I stayed behind the wheel for a count of 10. Then, Vasquez. Talk to me. The jamming was fading. Whoever had been running it was either down or had cut it. Her voice came through, clear and level, like she was reading a weather report. Target neutralized. Southwest shelf, bearing 247, range 430 meters. Secondary position, I need eyes on the north face of the shelf, there may be a spotter. I'm observing. I stood up. Slowly. My left knee was complaining about the gravel. Delgado stood up beside me. Moro's voice on the radio now, Vasquez. Sit rep. Target neutralized, Sergeant. Recommend holding position until I clear the spotter question. Estimate 3 minutes. A pause. I pictured Moro's face doing the thing again. That recalibration. Except this time the filing wouldn't fit any of the existing categories. Copy, he said. 2 words. The most expensive 2 words Dale Moro had spoken in 11 months. We sat on that road for 6 minutes while Vasquez cleared the shelf. No spotter. The shooter had been working alone, which was unusual but not unheard of. Lone actors sometimes, men who'd grown up on these ridges and didn't need a team to do what the terrain itself was doing half the work of. She gave coordinates for the body's position. EOD would sweep it before the next convoy. The rifle recovered from that position, she reported later, was a domestically assembled piece built around a Russian chassis, a hybrid thing, patient and specific, like the man who'd carried it. The convoy made Echo 7 an hour late. Preach had a bruise the size and color of a stop sign running across his shoulder where the door panel had transferred the impact. The round had not penetrated. He was performing stoicism about it with mixed results. By the time we reached Echo 7 he'd accepted 3 separate offers of coffee from the outpost's medic and was cataloging the bruise's color variations for anyone who would listen. I sat in the outpost's cramped common room and drank something that called itself tea and wasn't, and I watched Vasquez at the far end of the table. She was writing. A small notebook, green cover, the kind you get at a PX. She wrote in small, careful script and didn't look up. The outpost's cook had put a plate of food in front of her and she was eating from it with her left hand while she wrote with her right, unhurried, like a person with a long list and enough time to work through it. Lieutenant Garza, Echo 7 CO, came in, looked at Vasquez, looked at me, and said, "That her?" "Yeah," I said. He looked at her for another moment. 430 meters. One shot. Suppressed. Crosswind was probably 12 to 15 clicks up there. Garza sat down across from me. He was a good officer, the kind that had figured out his job was mostly to stay out of the way of the people who knew what they were doing. Moro brief her in? Other way around, I said. She briefed him. He sent her to the wrong position. Garza was quiet. She went to the right one anyway, I said. He looked at his cup. How? I thought about it. I think she just did the math and decided that being in the right position mattered more than being in the authorized one. That's either very good judgment or a court-martial. Depends on the outcome, I said. Outcome was fine. Garza smiled, just barely. Outcome was fine, he agreed. Across the table, Vasquez turned a page. She hadn't looked up once. The ride back down was different. Same road, same 17 turns, same gravel and drop-offs. But the character of the silence had changed. The convoy's radio chatter was loose, the kind that comes after tension releases and men start being people again. Delgado doing an impression of Preach cataloging his bruise, the static broken laughter from the second truck. Morrow didn't do the impression. Didn't laugh. He was quiet on the radio in a way that had weight to it. At marker 4, as we passed the rock cluster, he keyed his radio. Vasquez. Sergeant. A pause. Long enough to mean something. Good work today. She didn't respond immediately. I could picture her in the lead truck's passenger seat, rifle case across her knees, looking at the road the same way she'd looked at it going up. Thank you, Sergeant, she said. That was it. Nothing extra. Nothing weighted or pointed or designed to make him feel the cost of what he'd said before. Just the acknowledgement, clean and complete. Thank you, Sergeant. I'd been in a lot of squads. I'd served alongside people who'd swallowed harder things than Morrow's dismissal and never gotten an acknowledgement at all. What she'd just been given was, in the accounting of that world, a significant return on a painful investment. And she took it at face value. No interest. No compound emotion. Just the transaction, closed. I'd been reading her wrong from the start. It wasn't coldness. It wasn't performance of capability, either. It was something more specific, a kind of economy. She didn't spend energy on what wasn't useful. Not stoicism. Not suppression. Economy. Every unit of attention, emotion, language directed at what it could actually change. The dismissal she'd absorbed from Morrow, the isolation in the tent, the wrong position assignment, none of it had been worth her energy, because none of it could be changed by feeling it louder. What could be changed was the positioning problem. So she'd changed it. I thought about the scope in her lap the night before. Heat shimmer. It'll be gone by 0400. I check every night. Every night. For 4 days she'd been at this FOB. Every night she'd been outside checking her glass and reading thermals and watching a depression in a southwest rock shelf that everyone else had written off as wildlife. That's not patience. That's not even discipline. That's a person who knows something nobody else knows yet, and is simply waiting for the circumstances in which it becomes provable. We got back to Kellerman at 16:30. The sun was already dropping behind the western ridgeline, and the mountain shadow came down fast, the way it does, not a gradual dimming but a line, crossing the FOB like something being closed. The debrief was standard. Morrow ran it. He was precise, thorough, accurate in his sequencing of events. He presented Vasquez's position change as a tactical adjustment made under field conditions, which was generous framing, and he did it without visible effort, which suggested he'd decided to take the loss cleanly. I respected that more than I'd expected to. When the debrief closed, the tent cleared out in the usual way, Preach to the medics station, Delgado to the phone bank, the others to wherever men go when the day finally puts them down. I stayed. Morrow was packing up his notes. I sat on the edge of a cot and waited. He knew I was there. After a while he said, "Say it." I didn't say anything. You're sitting there saying it very loudly. I thought about it. She told you on day 1, I said. You had 4 days of thermal data, a probable position, a sightline analysis, and she told you. I know. Preach could have, I know, called her. He said it with enough weight that I stopped. His face had the look of a man who'd been having this conversation with himself for the past 3 hours and had arrived somewhere he didn't particularly like and was going to stay there anyway because he'd earned it. She's 23, he said. She came in here with a scope and a green notebook and 5 days and he stopped. Picked up his pen. Put it down. I'd been here 11 months and I looked at her and I saw a desk assignment. Yeah. And she was the one who, yeah. He was quiet. I asked her if she'd ever been outside the wire, he said. Flat. Like he was reading it off a report about someone he barely knew. I didn't say anything. She'd done 2 previous deployments, he said. I pulled her file after the debrief. Helmand, 2019. Kandahar, 2021. 1 confirmed kill each. This makes 3. He finally looked at me. She had the file this whole time. She could have led with it. She didn't think she should have to, I said. Morrow looked back at his notes. No, he said. She shouldn't have. I got up. Miney was serious about the gravel now, filing a formal complaint. I moved toward the tent flap. Calder. Morrow's voice, behind me. She know you went to bat for her last night? She knows I tried, I said. She knew before I tried that it wouldn't work. She went anyway. She went anyway, I agreed. I went outside. Vasquez was at the same crate. Same position. But, this time she wasn't holding the scope, it was cased, pack closed, everything squared away. She was just sitting. Looking at the mountains in the last light. I sat down on the ground again. We were quiet for a while. 3 confirmed, I said, finally. She looked at me sideways. I didn't pull your file, I said. Morrow did. After. She looked back at the mountains. Helmand and Kandahar, I said. Not a question. Just making it real. Different war than this, she said. Same mountains. I thought about that. The thermal data, I said. If Morrow had listened on day 1, he would have authorized Marker 4, she said. And, we would have run the same convoy and had the same outcome. She paused. Except it would have been cleaner because he would have known why I was there. So the only thing that changed was his knowing. Yes. And, you weren't, I stopped. She waited. You weren't angry, I said. On the road. When the rounds were coming in. You weren't angry that you were right and, nobody had listened. She was quiet for a moment. No, she said. Why? She thought about it. Actually considered it, not a deflection. Because angry is for after, she said. On the road there's only the problem and the solution. Everything else is noise. She looked at me. I'm a little angry now. I laughed. It surprised me. It might have surprised her too. She looked slightly startled, the first crack in that conserved exterior, and then, something small and dry moved across her face that might have been the cousin of a smile. Good, I said. I'll manage, she said. The mountains were purple-black now, the last light gone. The cold was coming back. Somewhere past the wire a dog was barking at something or nothing. Tomorrow, she said, I want to brief Morrow on 2 additional positions I've flagged from the satellite feed. There are thermal variances at both. I'll be there, I said. You don't have to be. No, I said. I know. I got up. Miney put in writing that it was done cooperating. I walked back toward the tent. Behind me, I heard her open her notebook. She briefed Morrow at 0700. He listened. Real listening, the kind where the pen is down and the face is open and the man is actually recalibrating in real time instead of building his counter-argument while you're still talking. It had taken 1 convoy and a bruised corporal and a shot from 430 meters that he hadn't believed possible to produce this version of Dale Morrow, but here it was. Vasquez walked him through both positions. The first was a secondary elevated platform near Marker 11, good sightline north, limited crosswind, accessible from the eastern slope without exposing a shooter to the road below. Someone had used it before. She'd identified a subtle rock disturbance in the imagery that suggested a prone shooter's position, a small depression where weight had settled repeatedly over time. The second was worse. A cache position, she thought. Consistent thermal signature over 9 days. Not a body, too diffuse, but the residual heat of equipment, electronics, something powered and returning signal. 1,200 meters out. Too far for any rifle we had. Artillery range. Morrow looked at the imagery. He looked at her. He looked at the imagery again. Who else have you shown this to? He said. Nobody. Intelligence chain? You're the chain on this FOB, she said. I work through you. He sat with that for a moment. I was at the far end of the table with my coffee and my left hand tremor and my expression of casual non-involvement, which I'd been practicing for 11 months. The cache position, Morrow said. You think it's active? The thermal's been consistent for 9 days, she said. It's not wildlife. A beat. He didn't say wildlife. I'll push it up to battalion, he said. Today. He looked at her. Both positions. I want your full analysis attached. I can have it ready in 2 hours, she said. 1, he said. I want it sent before the midday brief. She nodded. Stood. Vasquez. Morrow's voice, before she reached the tent flap. She stopped but didn't turn all the way. 3/4 profile, patient. The marker for call yesterday, he said. Off the books. A pause. As far as this debrief is concerned, I adjusted your position based on updated field assessment at 0450 staging. She was quiet. You don't need to do that, she said. I know, he said. I'm doing it anyway. She turned the rest of the way and looked at him. Level, dark eyes, the same 400-meter calm. Thank you, Sergeant, she said. And that was that. Battalion came back on the cache position in 18 hours. Faster than I'd expected, which told me the imagery had landed somewhere it made immediate sense. The response was a fire support coordination request and an intelligence tasking order. They wanted Vasquez's full satellite analysis packaged for cross-reference with signals intelligence from a separate collection team that had been tracking radio traffic in the same sector. Her 9 days of patient thermal reading had just intersected with someone else's 6 weeks of signals work. The two combined, I found out later, had been enough to authorize a precision strike on a logistics node that had been supplying the shooter network operating along the Korangal spine. Not just the man on the southwest shelf. The whole distribution chain. I found this out 3 weeks after we'd left Kellerman. At the time, sitting on that FOB with my coffee and my tremor and my watch over a terrain sector that kept trying to kill us, all I knew was that Vasquez's report had gone up the chain and the chain had moved quickly and nobody explained why. But the attacks on the road to Echo 7 stopped. The next 4 convoys ran clean. Not quiet, the mountains were never quiet, but clean. No ranging shots. No jamming. No radio static that had the specific flavor of someone choosing their moment. Preach's bruise faded from stop sign red to an impressive greenish yellow, which he documented with the same curatorial devotion he'd brought to the original injury. Delgado finished the audiobook he'd been working through for 3 months, some crime novel about a detective in New Orleans, and started it again from the beginning because he said the ending hadn't been worth the middle, which I thought was a pretty decent description of a lot of things. Morrow ran 2 more briefings with Vasquez before my rotation ended. He asked good questions. He deferred on imagery analysis without visible discomfort. At the second briefing he brought her a cup of the terrible coffee, set it down beside her notebook, and said nothing about it. She drank it without comment. My rotation ended on a Tuesday, which felt wrong. Wars should end on days that sound more significant than Tuesday. But the paperwork processed on Tuesday and the flight came on Wednesday, and on Thursday morning I was standing in a transit terminal in Bagram with 50 other men who all had the particular look of people who had recently been somewhere else and hadn't finished being there yet. I had my pack. My left hand tremor. A small stone I'd picked up from the road near Marker 4, which I couldn't explain the acquisition of and couldn't bring myself to throw away. I thought about Vasquez's notebook. The small green cover, the careful script, the left hand holding a fork while the right hand wrote. I'd never asked her what she was writing. It hadn't been any of my business. But I thought about it on the plane. I had a long time to think on planes. 14 hours back is a lot of sky to fill with whatever your brain has been saving up. I thought about what she was writing and I decided it was probably exactly what it looked like: notes. Data. Position analyses, thermal signatures, route assessments, the particular ongoing work of a person whose job was to see things other people weren't seeing yet and turn them into usable intelligence. Just the job, documented with the same economy she brought to everything else. But I also thought, maybe something else. Maybe the thing underneath the job, the part that didn't fit in a briefing. The count of days in country. The names of the men who'd gotten their coffee brought to them and the names of the men who hadn't. The number of times she'd been right before anyone asked her. The particular texture of patience when it is not a virtue but a survival skill. I thought, she was writing the story that nobody else was going to write. Not for publication. Not for an audience. Just for the record. Just so somewhere, in a green notebook in a tent at the far end of a forward operating base in Khyner province, the truth of what had happened was set down by the person who had lived it. So it existed. So it was provably real. That mattered to her. I understood that, finally, on the plane. The record mattered. I got back to Fort Campbell on a Thursday that felt like a different calendar system than anything I'd been living in for 11 months. The light was different. The air was different. The cars in the parking lot outside the terminal were the right size. I'd forgotten how big American cars were, and the food in the first restaurant I walked into was in portions that seemed to be making a philosophical argument about abundance. My wife met me at the gate. We stood in the parking lot for a while, not talking, because that's how it works after long absences. The words haven't caught up yet with the fact of each other. She held my left hand and felt the tremor. "That's new," she said. "It's Tuesdays," I said, which didn't make sense to her. "We'll fix it," she said. I didn't tell her we probably wouldn't, because I didn't know that yet, and because standing in a parking lot in Tennessee with my wife's hand in my tremoring hand was not the moment for prognosis. That was a different Tuesday. That night, after dinner, while she slept, I sat at the kitchen table and I took out the stone from marker 4. It was nothing, just a gray-brown piece of Afghan gravel with no qualities that distinguished it from 10 million other pieces of Afghan gravel. I set it on the table and looked at it for a while. Then, I got out a notebook, not green, I didn't have a green one, I used a yellow legal pad, and I started writing. I wrote the convoy first. The ranging shots and the radio static and preach store. Then, I wrote backward, the night before, the crate, the heat shimmer and the scope. Then, further back, her arrival, the far bunk, the way nobody offered coffee, the way Morrow's face did the thing. I wrote, "Any snipers here?" That's what he'd said, the third morning, to preach, loud enough to carry. Said it with a laugh in it, the kind of laugh that's meant to manage something the speaker finds threatening. "Any snipers here?" Like it was a funny question. Like the answer was obvious. She hadn't answered. She'd looked up once, held his gaze, and looked back down. 430 meters, I wrote. One shot. Suppressed. Crosswind 12 to 15 clicks. And then, the part I'd been circling around since Bagram, the moment when the shooting stopped and the convoy sat on the road in the mountain silence and every man there felt the quality of the air change. The moment when the thing that had been trying to kill us had simply ceased to exist, removed not by noise and firepower and the aggressive geometry of a team working in concert, but by one person in one position with one round and the patience to be right before anyone believed her. I wrote it all down. I didn't publish it. I didn't send it anywhere. I put the legal pad in a drawer and went to bed. But it existed. It was there. The record. That mattered. I found out about the strike on the logistics node through a friend still at Kellerman, 6 weeks after I rotated out. He sent 3 sentences. The kind of message you send when you want someone to know a thing but don't want to put too many words around it. Your girl's intelligence package. The one from week 2. Combined with SIGINT. They hit the whole node. That was it. I sat with that for a long time. The southwest shelf had been one man. One rifle. One clean shot and it was done. But, the cache position, the 9 days of patient thermal reading, the careful notation, the unasked for analysis from a specialist who'd been on the FOB for 5 days and was reading satellite feeds because that was her job and she was going to do her job whether anyone was watching or not, that had reached back along a logistics chain and removed something that would have kept killing people for the next year. Not the man. The supply. The infrastructure of it. The apparatus. The thing that kept the next man and the next arriving at a southwest rock shelf with a patient rifle and a wind shadow and a line of sight to our road. She hadn't needed a debrief or a citation or a changed position on anyone's internal accounting. She'd done the work. The work had consequences she'd probably never been told about and might never find out. "I'll manage," she'd said, when I asked if she was angry. Yeah, I thought she would. I still have the stone. It's on my desk now, next to a framed photo from Campbell and a coffee mug that says something my daughter thought was funny when she was 9. The stone doesn't say anything. It's just a piece of gravel with no qualities that distinguish it from any other piece of gravel in Kunar province, except that I picked it up from the ground near Marker 4 on a mountain road in Afghanistan on the day a quiet girl in a wrong position took one suppressed shot into a crosswind at 430 meters and stopped the mountain from killing us. I kept it because I needed something real. Something I could put my hand on. The tremor never went away. Not fully. It's a little better, the doc says stress management, and he's probably right, and I'm probably not managing it well, and that's Tuesday's problem. But, the left index finger still has its opinion on things. On cold days it's louder about it. On those days I put my hand flat on the desk and I feel the stone under my palm and I think about what it means to be the person in the room who knows the thing nobody else knows yet, and to stay there, patient and quiet, doing the work of knowing it more precisely every day, until the day when circumstances make it provable. Some people call that waiting. I call it what it is. I call it staying ready. Vasquez is still in. I checked not her file, just the general record that's accessible, the public-facing acknowledgements. 2 more deployments since Kellerman. A promotion. An accommodation for intelligence work I'm not cleared to know the details of. No profile pieces. No interview clips. No one's written the story with her name on the cover. She wouldn't want that. I don't have to know her well to know that. She'd want what she's always wanted, the right position, the right angle, and the problem solved. The record kept. Somewhere, I think, there's still a green notebook. Careful script, both sides of every page. The truth of things set down by the person who lived them, not because anyone asked, not for any audience, just because the record matters. Because it happened. Because it was real. Because some things deserve to be written down by someone who was there and will not flinch from what it cost to be right. End.